The gunnery batteries, of course, it was well within their range, even the 3-inch batteries, to fire back 16,000 yards. You know, and as far as a powder projected shell is concerned, 16,000 yards is really not that far. And the gunnery directors, they had secured landlines that went around to every gunnery battery on this island, and I imagine every gunnery battery on Eastern Island, and they were saying specifically, hold your fire, don't return any fire whatsoever. And simply as sort of a side note, the Japanese gunnery, it really did range from superb and highly accurate to just comical. Gunnery directors were noticing splashes thousands of yards offshore, you know, well short of the Japanese destroyers, but still nowhere near American shores. And they were kind of chuckling at their own troops, you know, sort of jumping the gun and, you know, wanting to get a couple shots in, kind of, you know, take it on the cheek and, you know, don't want to turn the other cheek. And come to find out after the war, not a single gunnery crew had fire, you know, and of course they were going, yeah, right, but they did. They went and they counted stores and they knew how many shells had been fired because of record keeping, and not a single shell had been fired in this, you know, 16,000 yard range period of time. And it was Japanese gunnery directors firing their salvos in the middle of a battle several thousand yards short of target, which was really, you know, kind of shoddy work. But the Japanese, after a period of time, after launching over 500 shells, as a matter of fact, at the island here, they started realizing that, you know, they're not getting any return fire, nothing whatsoever. So they started thinking, you know, one of two things is happening here. Either, you know, there's nothing here to fire back at us, in which case, what are we doing out here at 16,000 yards? Or, you know, our gunnery, our guys, you know, impossible within the Japanese Navy at that point in time. And, you know, and whichever one it may have been, they decided, well, you know, it's kind of silly for us to kind of lob our shells blind out here. We're going to pull up close. So you guys have seen South Beach and how, you know, the reef is so close. Well, they heaved to about 1,500 yards offshore, and they started lobbing shells, you know, almost flat trajectory here at the island. And they really did start doing some pretty significant damage. Of course, you know, what was in view of them were fairly inconsequential buildings, you know, laundries, and I mean, of course, for human living, that's not inconsequential at all, but from a military perspective, right. And then the American gunnery directors got together, conferred, and, you know, informed all their batteries to, you know, focus and refocus and make their gunnery, you know, direction as accurate as possible, and wait until the word, and then all open fire simultaneously. And at that point in time, a Japanese shell penetrated the command post. Now the command post is a giant, massive armored structure with thick reinforced concrete walls, and I'll show you here before too long. And in the middle is an armored bunker, and that's where all the communications would have been kept. That's where all the commanders that were directing all the gunnery batteries would have been. Within it would have been housed the power generation facilities, because the generator for island energy production was in there as well. And it was all sealed up, it was all buttoned up real tight, and the shell probably penetrated through an air duct on the roof and somehow managed to enter into the interior and exploded, killing a number of people, severely wounding a number of people, and severely wounding the chief gunnery directing officer at the time by the name of George Cannon. And of course, you all know that name. And he refused to leave his post. He was bleeding profusely, he was grievously wounded, he had massive pelvic damage, but he continued to, you know, function within his professional capacity. And the gunnery fire that was unleashed against the Japanese destroyers was withering. And within a few short minutes, the Japanese commanding officer of that small squadron decided, you know, we've had enough. This island, it's too tough an egg for us to crack. And so they did retreat back to the home islands. We didn't know how much damage had been caused. We had no idea. It wasn't until after the war that intelligence, you know, sort of review of Japanese documents that were captured on the home islands through our occupation forces realized that one of the destroyers had been crippled, had almost foundered on the way back to Japan several times. And the other destroyer was in very serious condition. And as a matter of fact, when they both got back, they were both in dry dock for over a year. And for a destroyer to be in dry dock for over a year is an enormous amount of time. That's just almost unheard of even then. And so that's testimony to the professionalism of the gunnery batteries out here. That they were, well, I shouldn't say that they shouldn't have been able to hold their fire during this period of time because they were ordered to, but they did. Let over 500 shells sail past them, and then when it was time to, give what they had received, they did. But the damage here had been caused. The patrol boat operations here were sort of paralyzed for a short period of time. Seaplane hangar was on fire. We lost a bunch of good men here at the command post, and it was in its own world of hurt. A number of buildings out here had been damaged and destroyed. A lot of buildings that made life relatively miserable for the people that were posted out here. Eastern Island received some hits, but nothing to the extent that damage was inflicted here. And also on December 7th, there was a clipper that escaped from Wake Island because Wake Island had been strafed by Japanese aircraft. And it landed here in the evening, so they were still trying to, get things all arranged here together. And it had passengers, it had 20 passengers. So civilians went during the evening of December 7th, headed back to Honolulu, and then of course back to the mainland. And that was the very last clipper flight, very last civilian clipper flight ever, on December 7th. And the aircraft, as a matter of fact, when it was trying to lumber to take off from Wake Island, had been strafed and arrived with battle damage. Of course, nobody was injured aboard the aircraft. That's an interesting story. Wow, that is so you have December 7th, you have the double goal in Pearl Harbor, you've got the sort of peripheral activity here on Midway. And actually, let's kind of come over here to the corner. I'll start talking about a few of the other books. Let me get a Midway first. I haven't checked this season, but in the seaplane hangar, it's kind of an interesting story. And you guys can get up and take a look at it, kind of peek inside the tall portion. The tall flute here was where the patrol boat pilots would have their parachutes on to dry them out and perform maintenance. And up at the top, when we kind of go around the corner, if you want to take a peek, through the side slats that are missing there, you can see the pulleys where they would have, hung the line to raise the parachutes up. And it's just kind of interesting. I don't know what the remainder of the building would have been used for. I imagine some sort of, I don't know if the whole building would have been parachute related, but at least that fluted portion was.